So, welcome back, everybody. This is Night Flight, and Jason Christoff is back, and we will talk about Loosh and his personal experience with it. So, welcome back, Jason. You have been traveling a lot. Before we go into our subject, can you tell us a little bit? Where did you go and what did you do there?
Well, I went to Tokyo, Japan to give
Mhm.
4 talks on mind control and brainwashing again. So there was a public day that was very well attended. There was a media day that was very well attended. There was a talk in the parliament, which was sparsely attended by certain parliamentarians. And I was just one of the speakers, basically, but my job is to educate on mind control and brainwashing and propaganda during the COVID psyop. So that word is getting around. I'm happy to see that different authors, different writers, and different speakers are now trying to address, some successfully and some just getting the word out about how these modalities of public control works. Because I think it's really important not to document the symptoms of mind control, like the heart attacks and the strokes, which are the symptoms of people falling for the mind control. I don't think that should be as important to tally the death and the injuries. I think it's more important to say those deaths and injuries happen because of mind control. So it's probably better, a more effective defensive position to educate oneself on how things on the screen can change your behavior or thoughts or perceptions.
Mm. I recently saw an article here in Germany that talked about Japan, and it seemed to be legit. They said that certain shops in Japan are banning people that have been jabbed with the self-replicating
Yeah,
shot.
I'm not too sure if people are aware. We went there to sort of round out with the protest. There was a 30,000 person march in downtown Tokyo. So we all spoke on the stage and then we engaged in the march. So it was good, but it was about this replicon vaccine. Now, someone who knows mind control and hangs around scientists and reads a lot of science over the past 24 years, I don't think they have a replicon vaccine. So the replicon vaccine, I think, is a propaganda weapon. It is supposed to be a vaccine where if you took a Judith, you could vaccinate me when you came home from the clinic, even though I wasn't at the clinic. It was just sort of shedding, but I would get like the full effect of what
Mm.
you got. So I just saw it as a propaganda tool in order to scare people and to eventually start quarantining people who took it and people who didn't take it.
Mhm.
Because I thought that would be a great way to say, the people who took it are very, very dangerous to the people who didn't take it. So it was a great divisive tool. And in mind control, you have to watch for such divisiveness because they like to spread divisiveness as much as they can without really showing their hand. So I don't believe that technology exists.
Mhm. Okay, yeah, we will see. I mean, I think there will be a lot coming down the pike in the
You never
next.
know what's real. If you understand the characteristics of a psychological operation, you can determine if what's coming down the pipe is a real threat or a fictitious threat, and then you can sort of sidestep accordingly. But most people obviously don't have that capability, and that's why I think educating on those fronts are this most important.
Okay, good. So, Loosh, yeah.
Yeah.
When when you type in that word, usually what comes up that it is a hyperdimensional energy that the human soul gives off when traumatized. Would you agree with that?
I, I looked it up because, I mean, you read the story that I wrote
Mm.
where, as a young child, trying to explain that, I only got the explanations later, where other people probably encountered the same. But yeah, I think it's soul energy. And a lot of people don't look at the words as hard as I do. And if you look at louche and you take the H off and spell it backwards, you do get soul, right? And H is also sort of a hieroglyphic that has to do with the number 11. So H is basically an 11 with a connection between. And if you know what the 11 represents, even the word 11 is L even. And L is generally another hieroglyphic for electricity. So 11 means sort of parallel, L even, like even with the electricity. And then, you know, if you connect the two lines in the 11, it's almost like an electrical symbol. The H is an electrical symbol where you can bring the sort of the electricity, I find in my interpretation, sort of down into physical reality, or sort of connect to the electricity. So you can see Loosh does have word magic symbology that it has to do with the soul, and it has to do with electricity, and it has to do with connecting to something. You know, sort of like in the top part or the bottom part of an H is sort of a European electrical outlet, for lack of a better description. So those things go pretty far in trying to describe, yeah, this louche energy, which of course I learned from David Icke and people like yourself about this off-world force potentially. And whether it's real or not, the groups I study believe in this force. So I think this is why I'm sure everybody listening to you might be aware of it, but I think it's really important for new listeners to understand, yeah, you might not believe in it, right? And I might not entirely know exactly what's going on, but these people that I study that are organizing all the things I talk about in these parliaments, I've also studied that they believe wholeheartedly in this. And that is especially dangerous because they believe that if they cause you pain, fear, trem, and panic, that you give off some sort of invisible electric charge, which I believe they either A, think they can use, or B, they believe it's a food source for these weird deities, which also come up in the readings quite a bit, that they're actually on behalf of this invisible force, they're out sort of gathering its food through the terrorization of the human population. And supposedly, I mean, Michael Tessarian gave a great talk on this, I believe, called something. The title is something that has to do with Atlantis. But basically, they believe they receive favors, or they will get favors for, you know, big super feeds, and even decorating the victims in a way that entices or excites these invisible entities, like the star, the five-pointed star. I guess this is why generals or people in the army wear these stars, supposedly, because the ruling group coordinates this to be on the uniforms of the sacrifice. So there's a lot of different avenues to go down. But yes, louche energy appears to be, I heard it could be love energy. It just could be some sort of like a big pulse of energy out of the human, most times described as, yeah, terror, fear, and panic.
Yeah, I recently did an interview with Alobar Jones about bliss and louche. And because it has been my feeling for a long time that yes, of course, fear, pain, all of that is and remains a huge item on the buffet. Yeah.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
but I also think that astral bliss can lead you in the same direction.
Right.
Yeah, and we actually have bliss junkies, yeah, that can no longer live without this astral bliss. And I had moments of bliss in my life, but usually, for instance, in Kenya, I went for 3 days. We slept in tents. We had a jeep. Um, our tents were at the foot of the Mount Kilimanjaro.
Yeah.
And from there, we went Tsavo East, Tsavo West, and Masai Mara. And so then one day, we stopped the jeep. We all got out, and there was this hill. And then we went up the hill, and this wonderful, wonderful valley. You couldn't even look to the end of that valley. And down the hill, a herd of elephants with their little
Wow.
ones were walking by. That are moments that I count myself lucky to have experienced that. But I would say that is very, very different, that type of bliss, than the astral bliss.
I would assume so, given sort of the story I wrote about it, where, I mean, I guess we'll recount the story a little bit, that even as a young child, I would see dead people in my room,
Hmm.
and very, just not dead people dressed in $3,000 suits, dead people out of the Thriller video, where they were in tatters, their skin was sometimes there, sometimes not. They were sort of stuck to the ceiling at times with their arms sort of backwards, holding themselves up. And you can imagine, I mean, I don't say this lightly, I'll tell you, it was terrifying to see that sort of thing. And it went on so long, and my mom and my dad and my brother and my sister would know about my nightmares, because I'd end up screaming or running out into the hallway or running into my parents' room. And that was the original reaction. And it went on for decades, like decades. And even when I was a young man, it was still there. So one time I thought, you're having a child reaction to these ghosts. And although they're scary, and so I started to put this together, I thought at first that I might be entertaining them. Like, I really thought about, why am I seeing this? Is this real? Is it not real? Am I hallucinating? And I thought, okay, if it is real and I'm seeing dead people, or something that looks like dead people, could they be coming to visit because they're bored or trapped in limbo? And I give them, out of all the people on the block or in the city, I give them the most entertainment with my reactions. And I thought, well, yeah, maybe. And anything to stop these nightmares was the goal. So I thought, if I am giving them entertainment, I'm going to turn my back on them now. And I know that's going to be really scary for you, Jason, but turn your back on them and, sleep with your back toward the door. So I started to do that, and they would be less frequent. They would come less frequently, and then to the point where they stopped visiting. Now, it was only later that I started listening to other people talk about Loosh energy. So, and that was what I thought was entertainment. The person who was brave enough to speak about this ancient concept would say, wouldn't tell me personally, but I listened to podcasts and vlogs and videos, and say they weren't there to be entertained. They were there to scare you and take your energy, your fear energy, which is their sort of food at that point, almost to maybe potentially collapse them out of the spirit world into some, to the point where I could at least see them. Even, they were almost trapped in limbo. And then, of course, I thought, okay, you know what, Judith, I never discount anything. I have an open mind. But then a couple years later, I'm watching that movie, Monsters, Inc. by Pixar, which is a Disney subsidiary. And it's about an all-seeing eye is one of the characters, and then the other one's a purple monster with horns. So here we go. We got some of the satanic Molesh bull imagery with the horns. We got the all-seeing eye, which is more the Egyptian symbology. And it's a cartoon, though. I mean, these two characters, it's a light cartoon for children, and these two characters work at a place called Monsters Inc. And what happens is that there's all these doors, just the doors, and there's millions of doors, and it's in a big warehouse. And then, a grabber goes down and picks one of the doors, puts it in the door frame in front of one of these monsters. And there might be a line of like 40 monsters waiting for their particular door frame. And this is a place of work in Monster City. Somehow these monsters are working at this factory. And what do they do for work? Well, they open each door that's purposely placed in their particular door frame in front of them as a worker. They open the door and bingo, bango, bongo, they're inside a child's room. And their job is to scare that child. And the more fear that they put into them, they have this canister that collects the screams of the children. And then whoever collects the most screams on a shift is the champion, and they keep the scores like any other motivational corporate company. Always try to elicit the best performance out of the staff members. But I thought, you know what? That's sort of what was going on in my bedroom. And I found that this is a really weird concept. And why would they put that into a child's movie? And there's many other different symbols in there. Like one of the main adversaries is, of course, a serpent, a salamander, the snake, the serpent. So I started putting this together. And of course, if you listen to David Icke, and he just wrote a 3-part trilogy, and various other people that talk about this seemed like a viable explanation for what I was experiencing as a child.
Yeah. And so was there anything in your family, in anybody interested in weird rituals? Or because I always try to figure out how did that initially happen, that entities come into the house and they hang around your room and scare you. So was there anybody that was into rituals, into occult things? How do you think they got entrance?
I'm starting to look very closely at my mom's bloodline, not as an active participant, but she is Scottish. And the more I investigate the Scottish bloodline, knowing that basically, if you do a lot of Egyptian background work, you'll see claims and some evidence that the grand majority of Egyptian pharaohs had red hair, and that red hair is basically unique to the British Isles. And supposedly this is where all the wizards and warlocks and deep knowledge was at one time, potentially a part or sort of an eastern province of Atlantis, supposedly. So I'm starting, and if I look at my mom's history, her family history, there could have been some ritualistic things happening in the family, unbeknownst to my mother, but know that I know the history and know the background that I research. The father seemed to be potentially into some ancient rituals, potentially. Now, I don't know how that opens the door to my room and not opened to the others. The others, my brother and sister as well, are sort of more compliant and less likely to speak out, even if they were getting visitors to the room.
Mm-hmm.
So I've never really asked them. My spectacles, I think, scared them more than anything. And as I would, the transition point as well, Judith, between facing these things and actually being afraid of them and turning my back, there was a transition point where I would attack them. And of course, they're not, I'll tell you for sure, they weren't really there, because I'd smash into the back of the door, or I'd punch the light fixture, or I'd punch the wall. And so my room looked like it should have had some padded walls in it. And I think this scared my brother and my sister a little bit about what was going on inside my brain, or at least inside my bedroom at night.
Mm. So you talked to your family about your experiences. You didn't
Yeah.
keep it down.
Yeah, I would tell my mom there's monsters in my room, there's dead people in my room. And so my mom, she'd be like, this is insane. This is crazy. And there was one time, Judith, the scariest thing, I'll tell you, is that I have this picture. It's very large of me as a baby. And it's me as a baby, probably just under a year old, and I'm standing in my high chair. And the only reason I'm able to stand is I'm grabbing behind myself to grab on the side portion of the seat. And that picture would be sort of parallel on the wall to me in my old bedroom. And so I can't even really see the picture. And one of the nights, that baby, who was me, looked out from the frame and gave me a look like, how you doing? I think I stuck to the ceiling like a cat that night. It was terrifying. And I thought, isn't that weird? Me scaring me. And I thought, that's very original. Absolutely. But you can imagine, I don't know if it's some of the injections, the regular injections that you take when you're a child, or I didn't have the best nutrition as a child. Like, you don't really know if it's the brain frequency that's projecting out at a certain, it's almost like it's a phone number, right? Am I at such a low frequency I'm connecting with these messages? I just didn't know. But regardless of what it wasn't too good. But after turning my back on them, they did go away.
But there was never any attempt from your family then to tell you you're a psychiatric case.
No, I used to get told that as a joke so many times. I wouldn't know if it was serious or not from
Okay.
my brother, sister, mother, or father, because I was always a little different, right, than the average person. But yeah, they just would try to comfort me. My parents were always very supportive. They would never attack or verbally attack or belittle or anything like that. They would just say, "Oh, that's interesting, dear. Would you like another peanut butter sandwich? I hope it doesn't happen tonight." Or, feel free to come out of your room and talk to us if it comes again. So they're always pretty supportive. But I always wonder, why, and I'm sure there's some reasons why that are outside my comprehension.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's actually very good, because that way you shut people up indirectly. They get scared of speaking out. I mean, a lot of people who have paranormal experiences actually keep quiet for quite a while, because they don't want to be seen as the total nut job.
Yeah, and I just thought, nut job or not, I'd like some help, or maybe the elders know something I don't know, or maybe there's a solution that I haven't read about, or I didn't get there yet in the school system where they teach me about what's going on. So it is important to discuss it, because these things were very real, and I've only seen them. I think I saw one this year, and before that, it might have been 5 years. But when I do see them, yeah, I have this very visceral reaction.
Mm.
The people, like my partner, Christine, when I saw one this year, wow, she hadn't seen anything like that. She was a little afraid, because
So
it's
she
sort
could
of,
see as well.
no, it was my reaction. So I sort of attacked my computer desk in the room. And she, I had to sort of tell her what was going on after everything fell to the ground or broke, and be picking things up consciously again and going, oh, wow, okay. Well, this is what happened. So Yeah, I haven't seen them in a long time, which is good because I don't know if my heart could take that many impacts over a long haul.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And you already mentioned that at one point you decided to turn your back on them. Was that the first step to overcome your fear?
Yeah, and it was very it's almost like a primal fear, leaving your back open for attack, right? Your eyes are not engaged on the enemy. It's completely unnatural that if you're afraid of something to turn your back on something. But it did get after studying them, it was, and I did study them on the upside as well. Their visits seemed to really increase in frequency and intensity the more I gave them the energy. So it wasn't like I was toying with them in either direction based on the feedback I was getting. I'm like, okay, they're more frequent, the more violent I get. And then if I don't give them so much of a reaction, it's less frequent and less intense. But what happens if I turn my back on them? And of course, my conclusion were they were invisible regardless. So after I turned my back on them, I didn't feel any hands going up the back of my neck or anything, which would be quite the trick on their part, I believe. But they would just eventually go away. And that helped me mentally as a man, as a male as well. It strengthened me in a way where I'm not as afraid of things anymore. So it was a bit of a rite of passage as well to get, to go from being a boy to a man and just kind of say, if I die, I die. And
Hmm.
I'm not basically, if these are my foes and this is what I believe is my best bet at beating them, this is the card I'm going to play and I'm going to stick to it. So making that contract and sticking to it and moving through the fear had a lot to do with me gathering mental strength in other areas.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
that reminds me a little bit of what I did when I experienced sleep paralysis. Did you ever
What's
have that?
what's sleep? Is it sleep paralysis?
Mhm. You're in your bed and then you're in a, I don't know, it's a state of you're not completely awake. At least in my case, it was like that. But you are also not really sleeping. And you notice that you can't move your body. Absolutely no millimeter.
Wow.
And usually people see that in connection with, yeah, unwanted visitors, let's put it this way. But I never saw anybody. I never had the feeling there is somebody in my room.
Right.
Yet I had this complete, yeah, completely paralyzed.
Wow.
And what I did, I was I was not afraid, but I was extremely annoyed. And then after a while, because I realized it doesn't loosen up, and then I said to myself, you know what? This is really annoying. I'm going back to sleep. And that
Right.
is what I did. And I woke up the next morning fine, and the paralysis was gone. But yeah, that is a very freaky experience. It doesn't happen to me regularly. I don't know. I guess I had like two or three my entire life.
Right.
Yeah, but it is, it can be a very scary experience. But why I am saying this is a lot depends on your reaction to it.
Right. And when I used to have these things, I want people to know I was extremely unhealthy as a child. Not that I would have my choice between healthy food and bad food. I just couldn't eat good food. I could only eat bad food or I wouldn't eat. There was some kind of malfunction with my programming. I could only eat chocolate bars or peanut butter and honey sandwiches. tea with a whole bunch of sugar in it. So I think a lot of these mental distress situations can be cleared, because I did clear another one through good nutrition. So this bad nutrition pathway led all the way to I was in university. So I wasn't really, I still have some nightmares in university, but I was definitely suicidal in terms of thinking about it every day, because I just felt really down and really bad and really low on energy. And I think part of that profile is having those thoughts. And then I just switched my diet, and it was instant that I stopped thinking about killing myself. And and basically it was so instant and so full spectrum removal of this thought that during like during talking with friends, years later, like, oh, how's your suicidal thoughts? I'm like, oh yeah, like, oh yeah, I used to think that. Like it was just jettisoned from my mind. So I want people to know, like, the preface of the story, there might be a vibrational aspect where, and I've written many articles that I believe were more sort of like walking wireless radiation towers that give out a signal, sort of like an obelisk, that we give out a signal, we also receive signals. And I think if you eat really bad, like I ate, I think your frequency drops really low. And if we are sort of like a radio frequency tower, I would be emitting low frequency energy. Now, if the radio tower analogy is true, it also means I can pick up the stations equal to my frequency, right? I'm not only giving off a frequency, I can pick up. So I could have been attracting that. I could have been manifesting death, because it's a low frequency. I could have been manifesting terror and panic. And the foods I was eating was equal to what I, like, on a frequency to what I was seeing. Like I was eating death. I was
Yeah.
eating food that didn't have the nutritional profile to sustain life. I could have been dying. Like I was dying a very, I mean, we all die. I mean, we all die a slow death, right?
Yeah.
But I think I was dying an accelerated death. I think my frequency was much lower than the average person. Not only did I not like healthy food, I hated the sun.
Oh.
I would not go in the sun. So I was like some kind of vampire or something. There was something majorly wrong. And I avoided the sun, Judith, all the way up to, say, um, 29 or 28 years old.
Mm.
I would avoid it. Now I travel and have residence in Mexico just so I can lay in the sun 3 to 4 months a year. Like it's a complete reversal, absolutely. But this complete reversal, oddly enough, I want people to know, started when I changed what I ate.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that is very important because there definitely is a connection with all of this, even drugs, alcohol. Are you aware of Jerry Muzinski?
I've heard that name. Give me a reminder.
He worked in the prison system and in huge psychiatric hospitals as a counselor. And he predominantly worked with so-called schizophrenic people.
Right.
And
Right.
what he observed in his line of work was that these are not really hallucinations. And why he comes to that conclusion is, he said, when you listen to those people, it's, he said, real hallucinations are all over the place, but when you listen to them, it is as if you're listening to one side of a telephone call.
Right.
Yeah. And
Wow.
he was one of those who said, I think there's something else going on. He said they do not really have tests for the so-called chemical imbalance. Yeah,
Mhm.
there is no test to show that. And so he went the other direction and said, no, these people are hearing voices and they are under demonic attack, whether we like it or not.
I've heard that as well. And if you follow, say, someone like Dr. Russell Blaylock, who, doesn't tread into the demonic or spiritual realm, but he did a great presentation called Nutrition and Behavior.
Mhm.
And it's one of the best. I mean, obviously blocked on YouTube if you want to find it elsewhere, but it's fantastic. It's only 45 minutes. And that was one of the things I really noticed in my journey, is that this was a great talk. And he does mention that low blood sugar from eating unhealthy food to start, which can drop your blood sugar and make it unstable, leads to many different forms of schizophrenia, and that stabilizing the blood sugar with good food completely cured many different spectrums on that schizophrenia timeline. So I agree with you. And there's been many people, I've heard of this guy before. I've heard these stories before, that he believed they were channeling, or something was walking into them and having a talk through them or something like that.
Yeah, and what he also found out that it was very extreme in people who had hardcore alcoholism problems, plus the people who were on crystal meth.
Right.
Yeah, and he said the way he looks at it is that a number of drugs can open you up to that type of experience. And if you don't go off the drug, then it will get worse and worse and worse. And then what you say, plus the bad, drug addicts usually do not have very good eating habits. So all of this is piling up.
Yeah, and the alcohol is, I mean, I've done a lot of research on the alcohol. Everybody in this page is going to know alcohol is based on the word al ghul, ghul meaning spirit. We call them spirits. I believe we call it booze because the BOO at the front, sort of boo, means ghost. And there's a vodka. I don't know what the vodka is, but I listed one of its advertisement at the bottom of one of my articles, and I think it's Amsterdam vodka. I think it's called Amsterdam vodka, and its slogan is "Pour your soul out."
Oh, yeah.
And I always tell people, watch the words, watch the colors, watch the symbology, because there's so much involved with alcohol. And in mind control, I mean, if you circle back to mind control, there's so many mind control experts that say, yeah, we can get X amount of compliance with our mind control trickery, but if we get them drinking before we come in with the same trickery, we get like double the compliance because of, I don't know, like, what's the reason there? I assume it's because it changes brain function, but maybe it's something else. Like, what we call science could be a explanation. We could have parallel explanations for everything we're seeing. Like, if you get a group of 100 people in a room and put standard mind control modalities to them to make them do X, Y, and Z, you can get 30% compliance. But if you get them drinking before you do it, you get like 55 or 60. What is that? Like, really, what is that? It's common knowledge in the mind control field that the more poisoned your person, the more they comply. But are there other explanations that scientists sort of veer away from? Absolutely.
Yeah. And I also find it very interesting that at the same time, there is, of course, a attempt to ridicule all of this. Yeah. That
Mm.
there are no unseen energies and none of this is real. While at the same time, you know, let's say people that have founded huge corporations, that really make an impact in the world. You can bet your bottom dollar they never found it on a Mercury retrograde, for instance. Yeah,
Right.
is not going to happen. They know exactly how to use the energies, unseen energies, how to be more successful. I'm not saying you cannot be successful if you did found your business during Mercury retrograde, but they pull, you know, they pull all the intel that they have, and yeah, of course, they also know about louch energy and how you can harvest that from the masses, and on it goes, while at the same time, they are telling everybody it's nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, JP Morgan is famous to saying, no, millionaires don't, uh, you know, consider the constellations, during their business decisions, but he say billionaires do. That's what he said.
Yeah.
So and of course, JP Morgan has the ties to ancient, this ancient blood lineage that hoards this information. And of course, the invisible energies, we see them all the time, and science tips its hat to these invisible energies all the time. Like they calculated the gravitational pull needed to keep the moon in place, and they were 90% short. They're like, and so they said, oh, okay, it's dark energy. And we're like, okay. So there's a lot of invisible, magic, tipping of the hat to the magic realm. In the science realm, like anything they call dark energy is just an invisible force. And how do butterflies get from Mexico to Canada? And
Mhm.
not only did the monarch butterflies get from Mexico to Canada, the ones who leave Mexico never get there. They get a third of the way there and die. And then they have children who go the next third and then they die. And so the third generation's the only generation that makes it to Canada, but they're not teaching each other how to fly. Like it's an invisible energy. There's invisible transfer. There's invisible magnetic fields they follow, or it's invisibly set into their cells. There's actions we can't see that are, I mean, even the tides, our ancient ancestors knew that if you see something moving in the physical realm that you have no explanation for, in the physical realm, it has to be outside. It has to be the invisible. And more than anybody, they call that the ether or the
Mhm.
fifth element. So when the tides would move, they'd look around and say, who's moving the tides? Why is
Mhm.
that happening? So there's no physical sort of, you can't see what's moving the tides. So that's where they brought in what's called the fifth element, the ether, the electricity, the invisible, because obviously that's a factor here on the planet. And then they got really interested in seeing if they could manipulate the invisible, because if you can manipulate the invisible, which is what mind control is, and you can control people's behavior without them physically seeing that you're touching them, boy, can you have your way with them. And we saw that from 2020 to 2024. Uh, you know,
Yeah.
4 billion people lined up to do something based on the invisible, something that never even existed.
Yeah. And here where I live, we have a lot of geese here. And now they are starting to fly south in huge flocks. And yeah, they know, they simply know. Nobody teaches them, that is the date when you have to move. Or the animals, early 2000s, the huge tsunami in South Asia,
Thailand.
yeah, Thailand, Sri Lanka, and
Yeah.
yeah, the
All the
animal,
animals left.
yeah, the animals left. They went to higher ground. They knew hours before humans got anything.
Yeah, and the old senior farmers saw when the oxen started pushing on the gate. I remember the one farmer story that there were some oxen that used to pull his plow, and they started walking up the mountain, and he's old enough to know, saying, I'm coming with you,
Yeah.
right? And then the other younger folk who more, what do you call them? Is it, yeah, right hand brain? Is it, what's the one that's analytic only with the, is it right
The
hand
left.
or
The
is
left.
it the left? Yeah, so they're like, yeah, no problem, but that tsunami was really bad, and all the animals had flocked up there, and a lot of the older statesmen and stateswomen, they went and followed the animals and saved themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. So thinking that there are no invisible energies is actually a little bit childish, I would say. And yeah, I also, the current situation here that we are experiencing right now, I mean, craziness all over the place. If Israel and Iran is going to blow up what is in the wings in Ukraine and with Russia, who knows? And but all of this terror is feeding somebody.
Absolutely. And it could be feeding, a lot of people could understand easily that it's feeding bankers, it's feeding the military industrial complex, it's feeding industrial manufacturers, but they would have a hard time if they're new to this concept that there is a belief system. It's not ours. We've learned about it through whistleblowers and documents and books that have come out, that this group really does believe that scaring people provides a food source. And then this is how you can understand their rituals as well. A lot of the rituals have to do with children, and we call them evil because they are. But they believe that scaring a child elicits greater pulses of the louch, right? Because they sort of look at the human body as a battery. And let's say I'm 54, but let's just say I'm 50 and say I'm supposed to live to 100. They look at my battery as sort of half empty. And
Mhm.
so the charge I could give them, the pulse of energy I could give them if I'm afraid, and I don't get afraid like I used to. So the pulse of energy I would give, not really the buffet they're looking for at times. But if you go back to when I was a child and I was, say, 10, and I have a battery level of 100, I got a lot of life left in my battery, right? I got 90 years from 10 to 100. I got 90 years of charge left in whatever conductor we call the human body. So if they come in and scare me, supposedly I give off a much bigger pulse of this louch energy. And we all know the stories about, I mean, you could go look, I mean, I could give you what's some of the best, John, who took Johnny? If anybody's ever watched the documentary, Who Took Johnny Gosh, right? Go watch that if you want to know what I'm talking about with this group and children. And you'll see that this can explain why this ancient group that's definitely in power hunt kids. They really do. They hunt children. And we really got to be aware of that connection. Because it can lead, it can give us an ancient understanding of potentially why between the ages of newborn and one, that they advised in Canada now 28 pushes under the skin, and in the US 30 pushes under the skin of maybe 16 or 18 different V's,
Mhm.
like this. So it can lead us like, okay, so why are you giving the youngest kids so much, right? And why, what's with the C-sections and what's with the circumcision? And if you look at circumcision, I mean, if you want to attack a brand new battery and get the biggest impulse, circumcision would be the way to go. And if you look back in the ancient annals of this group, again, do I believe it? That's not the point. The point is there are people who are wielding our tax dollars who believe this. And they can, with mind control, you can convince anybody of anything. And if you want to see a prime example, look at circumcision, right? Prime
Yes.
example. This doesn't make any sense, but it makes sense to them if you fold in this ancient knowledge. Because I had that done to me as well. Like, makes zero sense. Like if I came in and said, "Hey, doc, my daughter's here. She was just born. Can you cut off like third of her ear? Because it's something we're doing at the house there."
Mm.
Doctor would be like, let me call the police. But if you come in and say you're doing this to a man, they're like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, hold on a sec. Let me just book it in." And this is the power of mind control. And this is why I talk about mind control, because we're engaged in things in this society that you could make into an Egyptian black magic movie. And we're believing we're upstanding, credible, peaceful, logical, rational citizens. And that's the power of mind control. Can make you do anything, plus make you believe falsely that you're completely sane as you're doing insane things.
Mm. Yeah, exactly. And so much I know all these conflicts, Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Gaza, it's so polarized. Yeah, that you cannot say anything without getting trashed.
Yeah.
Yeah, from one side or another. Um, the other day I saw an interview. Do you know this YouTube channel, Memory TV?
No.
Okay, they take news items from the Arabic world,
Okay.
and they translate it. You have the English subtitles, and I chime in once in a while to see because what we see here is not what you see there.
Right.
And this one TV station had the son of Haniyeh, one of the Hamas leaders who was recently killed by Israel.
Right.
And during that interview, he said, my father could have had a state, a real state for the Palestinians, plus billions of investments years ago.
Right.
Years ago. And he said, but my father declined. To him, it was more important to wipe Israel off the map.
Wow.
So, and that is why I refuse to pick a side. Both sides to me are batshit crazy.
This is the conclusion that people like Max Egan also conclude that, and to me, if you look at the history, the group that I'm talking about that are masters of mind control, they've always used mind control and they've always used poison. So they have, and they're always hard on the kids because in the ancient world, this is the tradition to feed, the child sacrifices in the metal bowl effigies to Molech or Molesh. This is what this group was famous for. They were kicked out of many different lands, and I believe they landed in the UK because there's no place else to go. The Atlantic Ocean's there, so they got squished up there. But this group is heavily involved with trying to go back home. So people should also keep that in mind, that this 100 or 150-year push from interests in the UK pushing into the Middle East and now saying, "Hey, yeah, we're going to come into Egypt, Syria, Jordan, blah, blah, blah." Please be aware that there are historical records that this group always wanted to go home in the first place because they like the old land. We always like our own home states. So, yeah, and there could be a chance that this force, not the people who live there, not, it's like saying all Canadians are like Justin Trudeau. I mean, I'm Canadian. I'm Canadian. I'm nothing like Justin Trudeau. I have Jewish friends. They're nothing like Benjamin Netanyahu. They don't
Yeah,
believe
of
the
course
same
not.
thing. Yeah. And so please be aware that, you can find information out that, this ruling group has some very nefarious connections to an ancient cult that are obsessed with killing stuff to feed their ancient deities. And all they're doing is killing. So please connect the dots. And it has nothing to do with the citizens who live in whatever area I'm talking about, because of course our politicians don't represent any of us. So don't associate yourself with the name, with them. You're different than them. You're good and moral people. They are not. So be very careful.
Yeah. And that is another mistake that people often make, that they think, yeah, I wouldn't do that. Yeah, that's okay. That is because you are
It's truth.
a
Yeah.
moral person. But that doesn't mean that somebody else wouldn't do it.
Absolutely. And this group with their bloodlines, it's not like they share this knowledge with everybody. I mean, even the concept of the red carpet, if you've ever rolled out a red carpet in Canada when the Queen would come, and my friends have, you're not allowed to walk on it.
Mm.
Period. It's only for them. And again, that's the exclusivity that I'm talking about. You're not even allowed to walk. See, the red carpet represents the bloodline. That's
Yeah.
what the red carpet's always represented. And it's a symbolic thing to say you're not even allowed to walk on the symbol of our bloodline. You're not in the club. So this is what I'm trying to tell people is you're not in the club, and this group really tries to hide. I mean, a lot of the censorship that we're involved in today isn't just hiding what went on over the past 4 years. They're more interested in making sure you don't know anything about their past or their weird stuff with kids or where they come from and, why they couldn't stay where they originally started and why they went from Egypt to Greece to Italy to Germany and then to the UK. Why did they keep traveling? You might want to look into that because how many people travel unnecessarily, especially when you're already in a fantastic place like Greece? Why would you end up in the UK? Because you were kicked out because you're crazy. So
Mhm.
please be aware that eventually there's going to have to be some people to start talking about that story.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So, is there anything else on the unseen front that you would like to leave us with?
Yeah, I think the best thing to master the unseen is to master the seen. And
Mm.
I think the word apocalypse just becomes making everything seen, I believe, right? The invisible coming, yeah, everything becoming out in the open. So for
Mm.
me to control invisible forces, not like I'm involved in magic or anything, but I think food is magic. And I think healthy food is more than it's way more than food. Like when I go to my Christine's farm and eat berries off the tree, I won't even take the berries home with me. I mean, off the bush, I get it's insane the amount of energy and clarity just taking them right from the bush. So I just if you want to control more of your life and get the invisible forces in your favor, I believe our body has invisible capabilities, and I think they're maximized when we're not poisoned. I
Yeah.
think that's what the average person should know is that if we eat food from nature, unadulterated, as organic as possible, we get closer to using our frequencies for manifesting the best that we have to offer. And I think
Mm.
we have to come together and really start understanding the difference between life energy and death energy. And it's really easy to see who's obsessed with death energy and who's really trying to be a living example of this powerful God living vibration. And I really think we got to start calling out to death cult members who scream and protest for all things death and think that they're upstanding citizens in our society. Like, we can't, I don't condone any sort of death to anybody, but we have to start questioning these people openly that
Yeah.
thinks that freedom is all about death. It isn't. We have to use our freedom better.
Um, did you notice that Bill Gates has to stand trial in the Netherlands?
Yeah, and I wasn't laughing. I'm like, okay, is this going to be a real trial? The Netherlands is a real epicenter of this cult activity. I mean, it's got, what's it, 50? It has more migrants now than it has people,
Mm.
right? That's what it has, and it's trying to shut the farms down and trying to stop everybody in Europe. So I'm not too sure if Netherlands is the best place to have it because it's a cult stronghold. But yeah, if we want to talk about death energy, the man trying to block out the sun, cut down all the trees, and make everybody eat low vibrational insects, I think we can definitely put him in the Hall of Fame of death energy.
Yeah. Yeah, we will see what that is, if that has any positive results. I'm, let's say, silently hopeful.
Yeah, I hope I hope it for the U.S. election. I hope it for Gates to get nailed to the wall. I always have hope, but I always prepare. Like, I hope for the best, but I prepare for the worst.
Yeah, and I I mentioned this because we talked about unseen energies, and we are in a period of time where Pluto has returned to Capricorn, and then starting with 11th of November, it will be stationary in Aquarius and will stay there for 20 years. And that is why I say the freedom fighters, what we have seen in Africa this summer, that has been nothing. The freedom fighters will come out in full swing at the beginning of 2025. I'm pretty sure of that. And now with Pluto still going back into Capricorn, it's a mopping up, you could say. And to me, that has even been allowed, that he has to stand trial, because usually they kill it.
Before he gets any negative
Yeah,
press.
yeah.
And okay, go ahead.
And then I said, Pluto mopping up.
And I think another real important point, I know we're ending up here, but politics as a word represents pole or the obelisk by which, for you to read the stars, you do need a stationary pole in order to see how the stars move around it, or you can't see that the stars are moving. So the politics is the reading of the energies that come from the stars. And we have the real politics where the stars are dictating. And there's also this false reality, the false politicians. And this is why they say, I'm going to take a poll or pole position, right? Or pallbearer, which is spelled P-O-L. It's all about the post by which you stationarily watch the stars at night. And it's the real stars that guide, it's the real politics that guide the goings on down here on the planet. So I am hoping that Pluto, wherever you're saying it is, Jude, sticks this, you know, whether they call it a philanthropath, psychopath, and a philanthropist altogether, sticks his ass to the wall. Because if anybody's part of this ancient group who is controlled by low vibrational entities, it's this guy. Or, I mean, if we were to name the Antichrist, we know it's going to be Benjamin. at this point. At this point in time, Bill Gates is always trying to be nice. Benjamin N, we'll call him. I would definitely put him in the top running as the Antichrist at this point.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean anything with the people. That just means him as an individual. Nothing to do with the people who live there.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think the I would see them as Antichrist characters, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't think they will be the ones that will be, you know, the real
The king. We'll see. Yeah, like if
yeah,
some if some hoofed, horned, and spear-tailed guy comes out of the ground, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at that time. Today we just have the actors, I believe.
yeah, because that I guess that is remains to be seen, and he will be loved in the very beginning by many, many people.
That's the
Uh,
politics. Say that. Yeah, the
yeah,
real point.
because he will overcome a huge famine and give people food again.
Yeah, yeah, and guess who would have started the famine? Same guy. I
Yeah,
mean, I
yeah.
think people have to get onto these tricks that, they're coming to save us from the problems that they cause. So I just say it's enough of the fake politics. Let's get rid of the fake politicians, and if we have to, go back to the stars to predict what's coming our way.
Okay. So thank you so much, Jason, for being my guest. And yeah, guys, that was it. Night Flight for today. And we see you on the next one.